Alright, well, welcome everybody to the next masterclass, which is going to be going over a champion I've been playing a lot recently, which is going to be Senna. So first off, we'll drop in and we'll kind of talk a little bit about like the strengths and weaknesses of playing Senna.
Warning.
Alright, so without further ado, let's first talk about strengths and weaknesses of the champion themselves, just so that we can kind of get a good identifying factor for the champion. Because a lot of people always ask me, like, hey, when are good times to pick XYZ champion? So kind of understanding the strengths and weaknesses of a champion will help you kind of identify good times for you to potentially pick the champion. So let's start with strengths. So can anyone tell me like some of the strengths of a champion like Senna right now?
I'll say that Senna has pretty great poke, especially against low-range champions.
Perfect. So she has good poke against low-range champions. She has infinite scaling, like Canary says. Yep. So, you know, for those long games where there's lots of team fighting, she'll be really powerful in that sense. Flexible, yeah. She has a lot of different rune builds and itemization builds, which we'll be talking about, but not going too much into it. Go ahead.
She's strong versus weak all in.
Strong versus weak all-in champs. So things like, you know, enchanters. She does really well into a lot of enchanters. It's definitely the best time for her to pick up. She actually has CC while also dealing damage, right? She has her snare. If you go glacial, then you actually have extra CC in that same note. She has good sustain. Very good. So those are all like pretty good things. So yeah, a lot of people always ask me, you know, when are good times to pick Senna. So let's cover the weaknesses, and then we'll kind of I'll kind of help you guys identify good times to pick Senna and like what she does well into. So what are some of the weaknesses of Senna? Yeah, we can just start there. Really squishy, for sure. Big super early. Poor positioning gets you killed. Some mana problems. Okay.
The root is too weak against champions with a dash.
Can struggle positioning versus lots of dashes. Doesn't fit into every team comp.
I would say another weakness of Senna is that she's honestly kind of hard to play.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me, though.
Hard to play. No, honestly, she is very difficult to play. I do agree with that. That was probably one of the ones I was gonna add to it. So, all right, yeah, this is a pretty good thing. So, basically, strengths of the champion, right? She does really well into enchanters. She has like good HP swings because of, you know, all of her sustain and lane. I think her biggest strengths, honestly, are the fact that she does super well into enchanters, and she has a lot of flexibility that we talked about, and we'll be going over that when it comes to itemization, where you can go a lot of different builds that I'll be introducing you guys to, so she can fit a lot of different slots based on how the game's going and like how you just generally like playing her. But I would actually say that the most important things to really acknowledge of this champion is kind of a combination of you know, she's pretty squishy. Even if you build like super like pretty tanky, she can die very easily, and that makes her hard to play, right? Because you got to be auto attacking a lot, you got to be dealing a lot of damage, and you have to be really active on the champion the entire time. You need to be actively trading, you have to push your limits of your champion a lot. So I would put another part is need to play aggro to get souls, right? So you have to actually put yourself in a risk versus reward scenario a lot of the time, and that can be incredibly difficult to play on this champion. Basically, the best time really to be playing Senna as of currently is if you see the opponents pick an enchanter. Lulu has become like a pretty popular pick. Karma's not too bad either, and so it's kind of unlocked a lot more enchanter or ranged champions just in general bottom lane. So it's usually my biggest advice that if you're playing against a weak enchanter or just a short range AD carry, so Kalista is a great example of this, then your champion will be able to actually stack souls a lot. How does she do into all in champions like Alistar and Leona? She's significantly weaker in them, but she can do well in the matchups depending on how comfortable you are in the matchups. So if you're more comfortable actually, you know, turning fights, leveraging your flash, getting good snares off, you can beat all in champions and then eventually outscale them. But it's a lot more difficult for you to play those matchups than it is for, you know, playing against the Lulu, right? Lulu's not really going to ever kill you, so you can just kind of walk up every time and you can trade with her and then scoop back. Yeah, that's actually a good thing too. Wants an ADC that plays aggro with her. So she actually struggles with champions that are either short range, don't have poke, or like can't get pushed in a lot of cases. So Kaisa is one of the champions that you usually don't want to lane with. And another good example actually recently that I've been playing with is Tristana is not a good lane partner. So, you know, she wants to meet like a lot of good conditions for her, you know, for her matchups. But if you can meet those conditions, she's actually really, really great. If you can play her into enchanters, you can trade a lot. You know, if you have an early game AD carry or just something that helps you push, then you'll always be in good shape on this sense. Because you just really care about her laning phase. Her laning phase is really important, and it's important that you're farming a lot of souls and playing pretty aggro most of the time. So let's talk about rune setups real quick. I'm not going to spend too much time in this, but there's basically 3 different rune pages that I've been operating on and I like. So let's explain them real quick and then how to identify each of them. So the first one is going to be our standard one, which is just going to be the, as you can see on your screen, Glacial Shroud, right? So Glacial Shroud, perfect timing, biscuits, and approach velocity with alacrity and presence of mind. This allows you to just get good scaling on attack speed. As you're building this up, this will solve most of your mana problems, and it's just Glacial Shroud so that you can get 2 autos in, because that's how you build your souls, and the approach velocity kind of helps you with that, and the biscuits help sustain a little bit. And the main reason why we go stopwatch isn't because we build anything out of stopwatch, but it's just mostly that since Senna is a very positional champion, like we've kind of established, we want to be able to buy boots early. So getting the boot talent is counterintuitive to the power level. So we'll just type the Glacial Augment plus precision setup. So the next one is the tanky build, right? So everyone's kind of seen this on and off, which is just the full tank build. So instead of running Glacial, we are going to be running Grass plus Precision setup. And basically this is what you take if you like building pretty tanky. I still think the Gauntlet build is not too bad, which we'll touch on in a minute. But this is usually something you do coinciding like Divine Cinder or Gauntlet. This is a build you're going to usually take when you're either against all-in champions in bottom lane, or if there's just a lot of champions that get on top of you. Akali, Zed, Kha'Zix, etc. If you're worried about getting jumped on and don't want to die instantly, this is probably the rune page that you're going to want to do just so that you can build full tanky and try to be really, really hard to kill. Because as we've already identified, right, the biggest problem with this champion is the fact that she's squishy and needs to play on the edge. So being able to be a little bit more durable, play a little bit more aggressively, and unlock yourself is going to be good. One thing that I want to mention too is that Senna, a lot of her damage is actually tied to how successfully you're farming souls, not even really that much about your items. So sometimes even when you build like pretty tanky in a lot of cases, you can actually still deal a ton of damage just because all of your bonus AD is tied into the souls that you build. So next is going to actually be a hybrid build that I've actually fallen in love with and I do pretty much every game, and the reason why I do it is because it kind of gives me the best of both worlds. So recently I've actually been running, if you've watched my stream, Glacial Augment, but we're actually running the Resolve Tree secondary. This basically allows me to still get access to the 2 most important tank runes, which is Conditioning and Overgrowth, the bonus HP and the armor and MR, but it also gives you the Glacial Augment so that you can slow people down. This is kind of like, you know, a hybrid build of both of them. And the reason why I like this build a lot is, although you can maybe run out of mana in some of the team fights, and you're going to not have as much attack speed, I think that the sacrifice of the stats is completely fine because of the fact that you become a lot more durable and you kind of get both of the empowering elements of both rune pages. This is particularly the one I recommend to most people, but I like showing off the other ones too, just because of the fact that a lot of other people have been using these setups. So this is my preferred one, just because it still gives you the Glacial for the slowing and stuff, but it also still makes you tanky. You'll be missing a little bit of the, obviously the health swing and the health buff from the Grasp of the Undying, but I found that for the most part, since it's reduced at range by a large portion, doesn't really matter nearly as much. And then usually the biscuits supplement some of your mana problems anyway, because it enhances the max amount of mana that you get. So let's talk about build paths real quick, because this is where things get kind of complicated and where a lot of people kind of get lost when it comes to itemization. So basically there are a couple of builds that you can kind of do right now. Number one is just doing Divine Sunder and Black Cleaver. You can also then go things like Rage Blade / RFC in whatever order that you deem necessary. But basically this kind of build is just the tank build, right? So we have the full tank build where, oh, you're just going to be as tanky as possible. This is usually what you'll take if you go like Grasp of the Undying, or if you're just trying to be incredibly durable for there's a lot of assassins on the enemy team, etc. And you want to deal good damage. This is a really good build just because of the fact that just completing things like Sheen or the Phage will actually give you a lot of tankiness in lane and give you pretty good HP swings for laning phase. So this is kind of the number one build that you'll probably see yourself doing way more frequently. It's pretty good. I think most people like this. I think I've done this build a decent amount of times, and I'm kind of a big fan of it. The other builds that we don't see nearly as much, but if you want full damage, is Kraken Slayer into Rage Blade into RFC. Kind of our why Black Cleaver secondary? Because of the fact that your auto and Q both proc on hit effects. Black Cleaver is really good in combination with Sunder because of the fact that it allows you to stack armor shred for your teammates. So if you're looking for like more, and it has HP attached to it. So this kind of concept is just like, oh, this has 400 HP, this has a good amount of HP. So it's just making you really, really tanky, but also still giving you some good pseudo damage for you to kind of debuff people, DPS. And it means that if you get stuck on the same target for a little bit of time, you're actually still giving your teammates and yourself armor shred, which is really valuable stat in that sense. If you find yourself not needing this, the Black Cleaver second, then you can move into the Rage Blade or RFC, depending on whether you're poking a lot, or if you're just DPSing, targets a lot of the times that are bruisery, and you don't need the HP. Then the other build is kind of Kraken Slayer, Rage Blade, RFC. This is the most common build when Glacial was taken. You can still do this build, but it's a little bit harder to pull off because you're incredibly squishy. You'll do the most amount of damage possible with this build, but it has a lot of drawbacks of you'll be squishy if you do this build. So just be mindful of that in case you do have any interest in this. This is kind of like a minimum defense, maximum offense kind of build. So next then, I want to introduce you to kind of like, in my opinion, one of the better builds of all the cases, which is going to be the debuff build. So it's gonna be, isn't there an incoming nerf to Sunder, and do you think it'll affect her build? Yeah, this build will be a lot weaker in the incoming nerfs for sure. That's why we're talking about a lot of different builds, but right now it's still a pretty good one. And I'm not sure actually if the Sunder nerfs will actually make her super bad, just because of the fact that if you end up going something like the Glacial Augment Resolve build, and you do this, then you'll still have slowing effects and you'll still be tanky. And that's kind of like mostly what you want in these kind of cases. Sunder, it does do a lot of damage, but like we already said before, right? Which is, actually, let's show you the tank build. Like the full tank build is the Gauntlet build again. So you can actually go for this item still. So Frostfire Gauntlet is actually still a fine item to build. You get a little bit less slowing than you used to before, but if you're running into scenarios where there's lots of assassins and the win condition is just to kill you, you can actually still build this item because it gives you a lot of armor and MR, and then it also converts all the rest of your mythic items into bonus HP, which means that if their win condition is to kill you every time, it's going to be incredibly hard when you build this item because you'll just be really, really hard to kill. Plus, you'll have a little bit of a slow field as a bonus too. So for whatever reason, if Divine Sunder ends up getting nerfed and you find that the damage is super low and you want to just be more tanky, then this is an option for you, is to just go the Gauntlet plus Black Cleaver into Rage Blade RFC. And basically you decide on Rage Blade versus RFC just depended on whether or not you can walk up and create pressure, or if you're just burning frontline. If the enemy team is engaging on you pretty frequently, then sometimes Rage Blade is better than RFC because you're just hitting people the entire time and you want maximum amount of DPS. Then the last build, which is kind of my own traditional build, which is called Debuff Senna. I'll actually be releasing a video on this like eventually, but basically the concept of Debuff Senna is, well, you're going to debuff people. So you're going to end up building something like Executioners, and then if there are lots of shields, you go Serpent's Fang into Moonstone. If there's no need to race a Serpents, get Moonstone into Serpent. Then finish off the Executioner item. You obviously have one extra slot after that, so it's kind of at your leisure what else you want to do. You can go things like Black Cleaver if you want to, shred armor. You can also go RFC or Rage Blade for damage, etc. This is totally up to you in terms of the final build, but basically the concept of Debuff Senna is that a lot of your power is pushed into the souls, as we kind of already established. So all you're really doing is just making sure that you debuff everything. And now that doesn't sound very fun or whatever, because at the end of the game your damage charts will be relatively low, but the amount of healing and shielding that currently is in the game is kind of on the insane side of things. So if you do this build, you'll actually have a lot of invisible DPS, which a lot of people don't really realize. So it's very common for me when I do this build that between Executioners and Serpent's Fang, I do between, preventing 5,000 to 10,000 healing and shielding combined. So a lot of times this build actually does a lot of invisible damage that you won't see on the charts, but it's quite powerful and quite potent, especially since there's a lot of bruisers nowadays going Gore Drinker Sterix, and, a lot of enchanters, as we already established, are matchups we want, and there's tons and tons of healing. This is a great build to do. It's relatively inexpensive and comes online really fast. The main thing is just learning how to identify when you go Serpent's Fangs first versus Executioner. So Serpent Fang first is good if there's like a shielding support, but if there isn't a shielding support, but there are people like building Gore Drinkers and they're eventually going to go Sterix, then you can go Serpents after you build your Moonstone. And actually, Moonstone is getting buffed in the next patch to increase healing and shielding. Now, that doesn't sound like it should do a lot for a champion like Senna, but it actually does. Because of your long range, you can actually activate the Moonstone at any point in time, just auto-attacking people. Plus, your Q actually gets a lot of value out of the bonus healing and shielding. And if at any point in time you actually have a fight where you were able to stack up the bonus healing and shielding, the amount of healing and shielding that you give your team with your ultimate, because it can hit up to 5 players, is actually insane. It's very common for me to actually look down and find that my healing and shielding bonus is doing more than the actual Moonstone itself. And the Moonstone is usually healing pretty well too. So this is the build that I've kind of fallen in love with, and I do more often than the others. But, in some games, maybe you don't need to debuff people nearly as much and you just need to get an Executioners, or maybe you don't have a lot of front lines, so you just feel like you need to do a bit more damage. So these are kind of like the options, secondary options for it. But in general, if you actually go debuff Senna most of the games, I find that you'll probably end up liking it and falling in love with this build. What rune setup do you prefer for debuff Senna? I originally used to like the grass build just because, being tanky means that you're just going to be able to cycle healing super, super hard. But I think in general, I just like this rune page for everything now. So this is the rune page I run pretty much every time, which is the Glacial Augment build plus Resolve. So that way you're still getting all the tanky stats of the Resolve tree, but you're also getting Glacial Augment so you can slow people down. You get the Biscuits so you can play aggro in the early stages, the Approach Velocity for stacking souls, etc. Then the most important mechanics of the champion is just auto attack plus Q, which we'll be going over a bit like when we go over our laning phase stuff, but that's just like the main thing that we want to always be doing is auto attacking and then queuing. One thing that Shiny Rattata asked though is when is it a good time to use wards to hit people? Basically, the only time you usually end up wanting to use wards are just 2 different scenarios. When to ward Q. Number 1 is to score a kill, right? It's just score a kill. You know you can finish them off if you could get to them, but you can't quite reach them. If you didn't know this, the Q actually clicking only goes about halfway of the distance that it actually travels. So when you Q through things, it doubles your range. So number one thing is, you're trying to finish off a player. He's out of range. You can use your Q through a ward to finish them off. So this is the best time to do it. But another one is if you have Glacial and want to start a gank / fight / chasing somebody. So basically, you want to have a scenario where you're trying to catch up to somebody, but you can't quite reach them for whatever reason, they're out of range, etc. Then you can use a ward and Q through them if you have Glacial, because then you'll slow them down and you'll get the approach velocity bonus movement speed, which will allow you to catch up to them. So those are pretty much the 2 times that we're always looking to use our ward Q. This is a technique that takes a lot of practice, but once you start doing it, it's actually really, really powerful. But to kind of like piggyback off this, don't forget you can Q through minions to harass, which you'll see in our lane phase breakdowns a decent amount, but that is just something that I want you guys to always remember. Okay.
Maybe a little nitpicky, but what about stopping backs?
It could be used for stopping backs. Yeah, that's not an unreasonable one to add for sure. Stopping backs to ruin resets. Yeah, that's a decent one too, for sure. I agree. So one thing that I've been doing recently is I usually do 2 lane phase breakdowns, but since you guys are the ones who showed up for it, I've prepared 4 of them, and I want you to pick 2 of them. So as you can see right here on the screen, we have Kalista Senna versus Lulu Trist, Senna Ezreal versus Poppy MF, Senna Swain versus Braum Ashe, and Senna Caitlyn versus Blitzcrank Ezreal. So basically what I want you guys to do in the general chat now is type what matchup you want to see the most. Just type one of them, and then we'll kind of go from there, and we'll pick out the ones that we want that people are interested in. They are all cringe. Okay, then the ones we'll go over are going to be Lulu Trist and Blitzcrank Ezreal then. So we will start with Lulu Trist. Okie dokie. So, main thing to note, as we've kind of established, one of the strengths of the fact that, we are Senna is we do a good job of trading with people who don't have good all-in power. So the primary thing that I want you guys to pay attention to is just farming souls. One of the great things about Senna is the fact that we have health potions and we have a lot of HP swing. So primary thing to take away from these kinds of scenarios is as follows. Whenever you're playing laning phase, pay attention to whatever spell that comes out first. So as you can kind of see right here, there's a couple of layers of what's going on with trading. Number one is Trist uses her E on the minion wave. So that means that I want to walk up and actively trade. Next thing is making sure we're using our auto and then Q. So you see we auto, we Q, and we're just hitting anyone that we can possibly can. It's okay to lose a lot of HP in the early stages. Just use your health potions and biscuits early, and then make sure that you're auto-attacking the minion wave so we're reducing our Q cooldown. Those are kind of the most important things that we're always looking for when it comes to that. And because of the fact that I walked up and created pressure there, you actually see my ADC got to access the minion wave the entire time, so we actually get level 2 first, which allows us, W, we're auto-attacking, we're using our Q, and just constantly scooting back after we kind of get our 2 auto-attack swings as much as possible. Then after that, anytime you're not hitting a player, the rule of thumb is hit a minion. So you can kind of see right here, I'm just constantly hitting minions over and over again and walking back and forth and looking for auto attacks on the enemy player. Also, as a cool trick, if you're not able to maybe walk up and auto attack, trying to Q through the minions is also a great way to create pressure, especially if you take Glacial, since you'll get the slow on them and you'll get approach velocity for that second hit. So as you can kind of see right here, we're just hitting the minions anytime that we can, and then hitting the players anytime we can. Looking for Qs through the minion wave, and since I debuffed and hit the enemy AD carry, I just use my W for the second stack. That's another thing to note too when it comes to trade patterns is if you take the Glacial, you can be a little bit more liberal with your Ws, so you can kind of see right there that anytime I tag someone with the slow, I'm also throwing out the W since they're already slowed, and it's easy for me to get that second stack, because your W actually counts as one of the stacks on debuffing someone for a soul. And as you can kind of see right here, we've just been pushing the entire time, and we have just a huge HP advantage because we want our HP to go down. We want everyone's HP to go down. Because in scenarios where everyone's HP goes down, we have sustain, and so we have the advantage in that sense. Senna actually plays a lot like maybe a Nami or Sona in the sense that any HP swings that we can get is really, really important. So you can kind of see a lot of our trade patterns too, which is just get those souls. So you see I walk up, I Q that player, I throw the W at the AD carry, and I auto attack, and boom, we farmed 2 more souls afterwards. So we're just, taking our HP down, making sure everyone's incredibly low, and just allowing ourselves to stack the souls. And that's kind of what we want to see from all of our laning phase. An HP advantage is always great, and a CS advantage is always great, but really what matters is that you're just on top of yourself when it comes to farming souls. So one thing that is really important though, and a skill to develop in general, is how to deal with, being jumped on, skirmishes, using our summoners, etc. Because when you do play like this, you're gonna get ganked a lot. And knowing how to turn fights, where to position, how to position around things is really, really important. Otherwise, you'll run into a lot of problems where you just actually can't use this champion. Remember, this champion is actually incredibly hard because you always want to toe the line when it comes to everything. So, as you can see right here, we've already got the setup for us. We have the HP advantage. Our jungler is down here, so we know we can play aggressively. Now, the main thing is we want to make sure that we're creating a scenario where we're collapsing on all of the same person. So you see all of my teammates ping here. So I'm going to walk over here. Now, the reason why I'm walking at the Xin Zhao is a concept I call leveraging. Whenever you have flash, basically what you want to do on Senna is you want people to use their engage on you, and then you're flashing and snaring, or snaring and then flashing, to then allow yourself to turn. Because of the fact that you have things like Glacial, and you honestly steal the movement speed even if you're not running Glacial from your passive. If you don't know that, 2 auto attack steals movement speed. It's actually incredibly easy for you to just chase people down and burn them once they've used their engage tools. So we walk up here and we throw out our W. We're actively dodging, and we see that he's DPSing him, so we're just focusing whatever our teammates are. So we use our barrier immediately, and we're just burning this target right now. Now, the most important thing, though, is the AD carry is actually walking through, and this Yasuo is moving here at the same time. So what we want to do is we want to position ourselves with our teammates. That way, if anyone overcommits to us and maybe tries to kill us, that my teammates are on top of them and can score kills. So you see right here, everyone goes on top of me, and I flash over here to reposition. Now I have I have all these players in between me and my teammates and our opponents. So it allows us to then start, I call it burning and turning. So we can start hitting whoever we can, and then slowly start killing people and continuously move up. So this is an important skill just to develop in general, because we want to make sure that we're always able to turn fights whenever people come down here, because if you don't develop this skill, then playing aggressively usually ends up meaning that you're just going to die over and over again when you push the turret, since people will run down here. And then after that, we're just pushing into the turret. We have all of our teammates down here right now. I'm really low on HP though, so I need to make sure that I confirm at least that someone else is taking the turret before we do anything. And now I'm just kind of following wherever we're diving and just going to kill whoever we can. After that, we pick up the easy kill on Yasuo. We're auto-attacking anyone we can, but we're all low on resources, so we use our last bit of mana for, for our snare. But fortunately, we can see the Tristana who's jumping over, and we just score the kill on that. After that, though, we do end up dying because they chase us down and score that kill on us. But a really good team fight, and one thing that's just really important for us to take away from, which is make sure to leverage your flash. We want to be trading our HP down. Never happened. Yeah, exactly. We want to be trading our HP down. Make sure we're leveraging our flash in the early stages. Focus the same target. And farm those stacks. These are kind of like the main things that I want you to be pulling away from this game in that sense, just because of how laning phase is. So after laning phase, we walk back into lane, and this is actually going to be a game, by the way, that we're going to be going Divine Sunder. So some people always ask me this question. I'm actually going to put it right here, which is how to decide what boots you want. So basically, the best boots usually are Ninja Tabi, Steel Plate. The reason for this is there's usually a lot of auto attackers in every game, so you can almost always gain really good value out of these boots. There's almost always, you're always playing against an AD carry. There's usually some kind of auto attacker, either jungler or mid laner, etc. Especially with things like Lee Sin, Silas, Akali, etc. being played in all the solo laners. So these are usually the best boots. If you build these boots every game, you'll always get good value out of it, no matter what. The next boots that I recommend a decent amount is actually swiftness boots. This is good if you're on a budget or need to position well. So as you can kind of see in this game, I do actually have swiftness boots. So what ended up happening was I want to build Divine Sunderer. Sheen is the earliest power spike that you can possibly get, and since we got kills, right, we want to make sure we're getting power in our lane. So since I bought the Sheen and I had the excess gold, I just budgeted the Swifty boots. That way I can reposition and I can still, trade in and out. Plus it's actually pretty good against a decent amount of the champions on the enemy team since they're mostly running at me. So things like Xin Zhao, Lulu movement speed, etc. So that's why I ended up going for the Swifty boots here, is because it just kind of matched my budget well, and because of the fact that there are a lot of things that we want to reposition for. Getting tier 2 boots as fast as you possibly can is a must, by the way, because it allows you to have so much more movement speed to continuously trade. So you can kind of see right here, I'm just leveraging my bonus movement speed to just trade on whoever I possibly can. Now, although you ideally want to always be, getting 2 autos and then switching to the next target, in some cases you actually find yourself in a lot of situations where you can just continuously pound the same player. So basically what ended up happening here is it was kind of a square up scenario where, my AD carry is keeping them DPS and I'm keeping them DPS. Why not the debuff? Why not the debuff build here? A couple of things went into the reason why I'm not going the debuff build. Number one, I didn't feel like they had a lot of shields that mattered nearly as much for the start of the game. So, there's just kind of a Lulu ult, and that's going to be the only thing outside of potentially, maybe Sterix and Sterix after the Gore Drinker. So I just decided that since I got early kills, I would rather do more damage. So I'm going the Divine Sunderer. If you find yourself, getting a couple of kills early, it's totally fine to just go full damage because, you're already winning the lane, and I'm playing a lane that actually wants me to play aggro anyway. So I'm just compounding that. Plus, there just weren't a lot of healing and shielding that happens in this game. If you look at like a lot of the enemy team, like Kale, Xin Zhao, Lulu, Triss, like all of these champions don't actually do a lot of healing or shielding. Just because there's a Lulu in the game doesn't really mean that I need like a full debuff build. So I just decided to opt into the damage builds instead. So as you can kind of see right here, going back to it, we're able to square up with the support. I'm just pushing the trades as hard as I can. You can see me, I'm scooting in and out, I'm using the glacial, and we're just weaving our Qs as much as possible. Basically, the second I walk into lane, the most important things that I really want you to take away from is just spacing so that both players aren't hitting me at the same time, but also pinging on your way. It's a skill set that I'm trying to teach a lot of people that are playing this game nowadays. It's an easy way to put you and your AD carry on the same page when you want to play aggressively. So if you like playing Senna a lot, you're looking for trades, hey, a skill is down or I see an opening, make sure to ping it on the way so that way, your teammate is following up with you and creating space with you. Otherwise, you'll just get 2v1 in a lot of the trades and then you'll just end up getting angry that your teammate feels like your teammate isn't playing with you. And then you see right here, we're just auto-attacking a little bit more. We Q through the minion, right? So that gets us to the soul. And we're just hitting minions to always keep our Qs on cooldown, which is the most important thing because we want to be HP trading as much as possible. Just always looking for any trades that we can. So since the shield is down, even though I got all of my stacks, I'm just going to trade even harder. And we pick up that plate. It's always important to just make sure that you're keeping yourself busy. You kind of see me, I'm always moving around. I'm always auto-attacking whatever I can. And, if I can't hit the minions or I can't hit a player, then I'm working on those plates. And those kinds of things really add up because it just accelerates you into the mid game so much more. You see, I already have 700 of my quest at 7 minutes. We farmed 34 souls. So just playing aggressively in that sense is going to be really good for powering up your character. And then after that, we off of the gold that we have, we're already able to purchase a phage now too, so we're just incredibly strong and we want to be continuously walking into lane and forcing as much as possible. So as you can kind of see right here, we're clearing the wave. I'm using the Q on my teammate, walking up, seeing if we can find anybody. We see both the players. He grabs me, I wait for the jump, and it's just an easy toss in, and then we can just chase them down the entire time. And as you can kind of see right here, I level up immediately, and we also just use our ultimate to score another kill. That's why also I'm a big fan of this, this glacial armor MR build, just because of the fact that having glacial the entire time makes it so easy for you if you ever start getting a lead for you to push the lead really, really hard. It's also why I'm a big fan in this game of getting the swiftness boots, because it just allows me to push the lane a lot harder. I'm sure a lot of people are kind of curious, when do I go Berserker Greaves? In general, I've started liking them less and less, and feel like attack speed in general is not nearly as necessary as I originally thought. The main reason why is just you're mostly not going Kraken Slayer anymore. So because you're not doing Kraken Slayer builds anymore, your attack speed is depreciated, even though obviously attacking faster means you do more damage. Just because, with Kraken Slayer build, you want attack speed as much as possible so that you can get your 3 proc hit. But, we're not doing that build anymore most of the time. The Divine Sunder is a Sheen-like proc item, so it's not nearly as necessary, and so the stat is actually depreciated a lot, so there's much better boots to get nowadays. And that's why Swifties and Ninja Tabby are a lot higher than Berserker Greaves. Berserker Greaves would probably be my 3rd choice in most cases, and if I just never met the condition of, needing Ninja Tabby, but I wanted to auto attack a lot more and just try to get a bit more damage squeezed out of my character. And then after this, it pretty much guarantees us the turret. And because of that, we've worked out all 5 plates. We score this kill, or we create pressure on this player, and we score this kill. And it just allows us to always completely play aggressive in most cases. Is Merc Treads ever viable? So the only time Merc Treads is really viable for your character is just if there's a copious amount of CC. So if there's just an insane amount of crowd control that you need to deal with, then sure, Mercury Treads are not bad. The main problem with Merc Treads has always been the same thing I've always had problems with, which is that if you build Mercury Treads, the Null Magic Mantle and the Mercury Treads are the same magic resist. So you're completing boots just for tenacity. Whereas when you build Ninja Tabby, it gives you armor and, damage reduction. So it's always valuable. Whereas the Mercury Treads tenacity is only good if you are able to create a lot of pressure in that sense. And, if you're getting hit by CC, which ideally you don't want to be. So that's kind of where the disconnect occurs in most cases. So we want to you want to try and avoid getting hit by CC, but if you're really getting hit by a lot of them, then maybe your boots can actually be decent. Okay, so then the other one that people wanted was the Blitzcrank game. Okay, let's get the Blitzcrank game going. So this will be Senna Caitlyn versus Blitzcrank Ezreal. So this is actually going to be a little bit more macro oriented, which is I'm going to be showing you how to move around the map after you get a huge advantage and how to play against Blitzcrank and build advantages in this sense. So the primary thing really when it comes to Blitzcrank is that he can't hook you if there are minions in front of you. So as you can see right here, we're just walking up and we're getting that push going immediately. Now if you get the push going, then it just becomes significantly harder for you to get hooked because there's more minions in the way, and even if there aren't minions quite in your way, if you're maybe positioning a little bit more aggressively, it still means that you have a huge minion wave advantage. So one of the things that a lot of people have a fear of when it comes to laning is that Blitzcrank level 1. A lot of people feel like they're just going to die instantly with Blitzcrank hooks you level 1. But in quite honesty, it's actually a very easy way for you to bait out a huge HP advantage. So you see, we already have the push going right here. And I don't even care if I get hooked because I'm just going to auto attack and trade my HP down. Remember what we talked about originally where we want HP to go trade down because we have the sustain and they don't. So you can kind of see right here, right? The 80 carry is already missing about 250 life and we just chug a potion. We're going to queue through the minion wave and that's going to get us back to full HP, but he's going to have a bunch of missing HP there. So, and you can see right here, we're using that technique. We're queuing through the minions as much as we can. Now, this game is going to be grasped, so we don't have the glacial effect, so it's going to be a little bit harder for us to stack. And ideally, you do want to be using your Q to give yourself a full stack, but when you're playing against a lane where, maybe it's not nearly as safe, so you're playing against an all-in lane where, looking for 2 auto attack can sometimes mean that you're putting yourself at extreme risk, then sometimes just queuing through the minion wave and getting harass off is good. So as you can kind of see right here, we get hooked again, but it doesn't matter. You see the huge minion wave, we just trade out our barrier, we scoop back, and we're just hitting them the entire time. There are a lot of times, especially if you just don't get hooked under the turret, where you can actually just crush lanes in a lot of cases. So main things to really take away from this is, as you can see, we've built the huge wave and we're just hitting the turret. We're just hammering the turret, work away on that gold, and we're just putting our Q on cooldown too by just queuing our teammates. So we're queuing our teammate, we're just hitting the turret. And then also, as another thing to note, whenever you play against tank champions, creating pressure under the cannon is going to be your best bet. So you saw there, we were hitting the Blitzcrank, just DPSing him as much as possible. And then when the Ezreal walks forward, then we hit him. And we trade out the barrier for the Ignite, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want in every case, is for you to just trade out your barrier for Ignite, because your barrier is a pretty short cooldown, and it stops a lot of incoming damage, and it lets you keep your HP pretty high. So you can kind of see, even though we've all traded down our HP pretty equally in this lane, we're up so much because of the fact that we have the sustain advantage. So you see there, I'm just queuing through the minions, and even though we're not getting the full stacks, it's fine, because what I want is just to harass them as much as possible. And now it's pretty obvious that the jungler is going to come gank, but you kind of see right here, right? We have a huge minion wave, so it's actually incredibly hard for them to actually win the fight. So then we walk up and we hit the damage dealers. So I force the Ezreal back by walking up and auto attacking him. And you can kind of see right here, it forces the Kindred to try and reinforce. We do a switcheroo and we auto him, and then we just keep DPSing the next person, and that person's dead too. This is why HP advantage and playing on the edge and playing really aggressive is really important, because you create scenarios like this where a jungler feels like he's obligated to gank, but actually, because you have a minion wave advantage and because you just have a huge HP advantage, it doesn't actually matter. So you see, like, the old concept of trade triangles, right? We can focus this guy while no one is really focusing me or my teammate, and we just hit him as much as possible. Now, the main thing to note, though, is see the ADC, he's coming to reinforce and deals damage. So I'm just going to push him. Off in that sense. I noticed you never use your E to chase people. Why? Mana. So in this scenario, my E isn't important right now, because you only really want to use E in these kinds of scenarios when you're either just cleaning up players, or if you're really, really low and you want to stop them from auto-attacking, because they can't auto-attack you when you're in the Shroud as long as you don't auto-attack. So I don't lead with the E because I want to make sure I have enough mana for this fight. So you see right here, right, we're at 74 mana. It's one of the drawbacks kind of running Grasp, is you don't get any of the biscuits early. So we're just saving our mana, not using our E, and we're DPSing him. So then once the AD carry comes to reinforce, we just hit him. We put pressure on him. We push him out. And I don't want to chase any of these players right now because my jungler's not here. So I just hit the Blitzcrank, who's kind of useless at this point in time, and we kind of feint pressure. My intention is to go back on them, but I'm waiting for them to get a little bit closer so that it's just easier for me to turn. And because of that, we're able to actually just score a kill on all of them, and push out the wave and work on another plate. And after that, we clear out the wave, we get all of these souls, and you can kind of see right here, our first reset is already 1,400 gold, just because of the fact that we've been able to push and have good trading in the first 30 seconds to 45 seconds of a lane. And this is an easy way to show you how to snowball a small advantage into a huge one in most cases. So after that, we're in this build, we're actually going to be building the Gauntlet, just because there's a lot of assassin-like champions. There's a little Blanc, there's a Kindred, there's a Pantheon, etc. Blitzcrank getting hooked, etc. So this is actually a game where I do actually build the Gauntlet. So if you do decide that you like the Gauntlet build, you just want to be as tanky as possible, be unkillable, etc. Don't care as much about dealing damage, then this is kind of the build for you. And basically the thought process behind it is we grab the 2 ruby crystals and the armor, which are all pieces of the Gauntlet, but they all individually give you insanely good stats. After that, we just roam mid, because we want to make sure that we're countering the Blitzcrank that's moving forward. So we just walk forward. Look at us. We have over 1,000 HP, so I can just tank the hook, and we create a ton of pressure on that player. Then, after that, we use our E. We turn this fight by just using our snare, and since our jungler showed up at the same time, it's just an easy free kill for us. And you can kind of see already the dividends of building like this sometimes is that, a lot of the assassin or all-any champions have a really tough time killing us. We got hooked, Blitzcrank hooked us, knocked us up, we're totally fine. Pantheon jumps on us, totally fine. So we're all in really good shape, despite the fact that normally on Senna we would end up dying for that. And then because we pushed out the Blitzcrank, it's an easy dive under here where I just make sure I tank the turret. And we walk up, we just turret dive that guy, and we just keep working on all those plates, clearing out the wave and making sure that, you know, we're auto-attacking and using our Q to get our sustain up. And despite the game being, you know, a 7-minute game, we've almost got 4 plates already. So this is kind of like an easy way to show you how to snowball an advantage just by having, you know, good pushing, good trading in the first couple of levels and just turning that into kind of a balloon of a huge wave advantage. So after that, you know, obviously, because just the Blitzcrank is shown here right now and we have pretty good pushing, we're just making sure that we throw our Qs into the wave and get that push going so we're covering the jungler and so that we can keep working on those plates. So after we fully push the wave, since my jungler is struggling a little bit on it and Lily doesn't do, you know, dragon very well, we walk over here and make sure that we help him out too. But the thing is since we have such a huge advantage, we don't always need to take our resets. You can sometimes actually, instead of taking your reset, just opt into staying in the lane. So you see Caitlyn has stayed in the lane, so I'm just going to stay in the lane also and continue to pressure, since the AD carry has actually lost a tremendous amount of HP. Then after that, we just push the wave into the turret, and because we have a huge HP advantage, we're actually able to get the turret at an entire 8 minutes. Which is super huge for us because that means that we still have, you know, over 6 minutes of workable plates. So we have a lot of options on the table. And the main thing to take away too is since we have a champion that pushes well with us, we're just always getting that extra wave. We're always pushing in that extra wave so that we're always getting farm before we're taking our reset. That way we're not missing any, you know, gold or EXP. And because of that, we're able to just buy out the full gauntlet immediately. And this is kind of where maybe some macro comes into it, but we're going to go top instead of staying bottom lane. So rather than go mid or whatever, we're just going to switch into the top lane because there's a Rift Herald and because we're switching really early. So if you ever do get advantages like this where you take turrets relatively early, swapping in the top lane, especially if the Rift is still up, is a great idea just because of the fact that it allows you to give you a secondary objective and just continue snowballing your advantage. After that, we just kind of establish some vision so we can see up and down the river. We walk over here, we execute this dive where, you know, our top laner is still top, and now all of us are top now. And it allows us to kind of continuously, you know, pressure the turret. We're constantly pushing in the waves, and this allows us to actually get the next turret before 11 minutes. Now, because of the fact that, you know, we have a lot of free time and we see a lot of people moving in mid, we can just walk over to this. We're really strong. We have a lot of gold, etc. And since we've done the tanky build, we can absorb engages very easily. So once the fight happens, just use your snare on whoever is like very easy for you to hit. So you see right there, kind of the, you know, the Scion hits is stunned. So I just put my snare onto that. So anytime, by the way, when it comes to team fighting, if you can, just leverage your teammates. No need to make it difficult for you to try and hit your snares. Sometimes it's just better for you to just throw the snare on whoever is already crowd controlled. Then after that, because of the fact that we have a huge win, we're able to get all 15 plates, and we're able to get the Rift Herald on top of that. So that's kind of like a tidbit on how to deal with Blitzcrank and how to kind of snowball your advantage really, really hard very quickly without actually doing things that are very complicated in most cases. Next we will be going into skirmishes and team fights. So most important things really are a couple of things on Senna. As we've kind of already established, you know, one of her primary weaknesses is, you know, her positioning is very pristine. It's very important. So a lot of times in team fights, what you want to do is kind of like when we play Nami. We want to make sure that the enemy players engage, and then we counter engage on that. So as you can kind of see in this screenshot right here, we have a team fight erupting where there's a lot of players through this corridor, and we have both of our, you know, melee like champions sitting on this side. So the most important things that I really want you to pay attention to is ult usage and who you're DPSing and comboing snares on players that you're burning down. So as you can see right here, we all immediately activate our snare, and we're not actually overreaching at all and just hitting whoever is in front of us and constantly pulling back over and over again. That way you can usually use your health swings to just kind of chase down and burn down everyone over and over again. And then once the fight actually happens where people collide, we want to be using our ultimates on it. So you see the engage occurs right here, right? We throw out our snare just to make sure that, you know, we're CCing anyone that's coming in, creating space. And you can kind of see right here, we haven't auto-attacked at all actually yet. So we're scooting back the entire time, not auto-attacking, just pulling back, making sure we're kiting them out, etc. Because, you know, with Glacial especially, it's going to be really, really important for you to just start the fight not dead. If you start the fight not dead and you're healthy, then you can actually push through and score a lot of kills and actually turn fights. So after that, right, we auto-attack whoever's near us. So first off is the Lee Sin. We hit him a couple of times. Then the hook misses. Perfect, right? So we want to make sure that, okay, pay attention to the Aatrox and the Akali. They're all pushing in right now. Now that the fight also has, like, fully engaged, where, you know, people are clearly engaged in the fight, they're going to fight, etc., this is where you use your ultimate. So making sure that we don't use our ultimate early or too late is really, really important. So now that I can see, you know, clearly that everyone's colliding and everyone's going to be fighting, then we use our ultimate. Ideally, by the way, it's actually pretty important for you to try to aim this at players, just because it actually does about, you know, 400, 500, 600 damage, and if you can hit multiple players with it, it's a ton of teamfight damage. So you'll see actually the ulti go through and actually deal damage to 3 players right here. After that, it's just kind of easy pickings. Once you survive the initial fight, a lot of it is just you cutting backwards and burning whoever we can. So despite that actually being a 4v5 fight, we end up literally 4-0ing them just because of the fact that we're kiting backwards and playing around our teammates and just having good time to ultimates. If you don't start the fight dead and you're always, you know, cycling, you know, Qs through your teammates and snaring whoever you possibly can via either your Glacial or your teammates staring them, then you'll have like a pretty good and successful team fight pretty frequently. So next what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going over a team fight where you're down a lot of gold. So as you can see, maybe you can't. The score is 21-32, so we're actually really, really far behind in the game. So the most important things that I want you to actually focus on when it comes to team fighting is posturing. Managing your spacing is really important for this champion because once you start getting a lot of souls, so you can kind of see right here I have 110 souls because we've been fighting a lot, we want to make sure we abuse that range because your actual auto attack range reaches further than most people's spells. So kind of playing at the edges and hitting people over and over again and creating pressure on them is a really important skill that I want you guys to develop. And we're going to be actually doing the debuff Senna in this fight. So as you can see right here, we're kind of stepping up and down. We're looking and constantly fishing for auto attacks, and anyone who walks forward, we can harass. So you see the Graves, auto attack him once. Scoot back a little bit, and this forces the Alistar to engage. So as we kind of stated before, right, we want to make sure our ulti is going across the fight as much as possible, and we're, you know, getting damage on people. So you see the Sylas running in, the Alistar is here, and my ulti is going to grab everyone. And the important thing is really to pay attention to the concave. So you kind of see right here where, you know, the AD carry is back here, the Sylas is here, the Graves is here, and how we want to play the team fight. So we ulti across it. Now we want to make sure that our damage is actually going onto important people. So in scenarios where CC is used, don't bother hitting those players. Don't get stuck on them. So as you can see right here, I'm going to run past the Alistar, and I'm actually putting pressure on both the Graves and the AD carry as we put a couple hundred damage into him. So you see I'm just completely ignoring the Alistar the entire time and just burning whatever I can in front of me. And then after that, we can use our E because remember we have like we have a good movement speed swing on that, and we're able to actually chase down and kill everyone despite the fact that we're down thousands of gold. So a lot of times, one of the biggest problems that I see a lot of people do is they just get caught on tanks too frequently. But if the tank uses their crowd control, it's okay to walk past them, create pressure on some of the carries, you know, auto attack them, etc. Your character, even when you build kind of utility oriented or even defensive oriented, if you're doing a good job farming souls, you'll actually do a pretty good amount of damage to carries. So that's kind of what I wanted you to pull from this team fight and pay attention to. I know team fights are really fast nowadays, so that's why it's really important for every piece of damage that you deal to actually matter and connect to people that we care about. So next what we're going to do is we're going to be showing a team fight, and I'm going to be teaching you guys how to turn fights that actually look terrible. So this is going to be the last one of our team fights, so we'll kind of break this one down. So in this game, we're actually going to be running Divine Sunderer, and sometimes in team fights what happens is that your teammates get engaged on. So in scenarios where you're at a disadvantage and your teammates are getting engaged on, usually the first skill you actually want to use is the E. We want to use this E so that it can give them the movement speed to help them kite out, plus it also, you know, it doesn't allow them to get auto attacked, and it stealths them. So it makes it a little bit harder for people to aim spells at them. So as you can see right here, right, our teammate is getting jumped on, we throw out the snare, and we E immediately. This allows us to kind of cover up where our teammates are, which actually kind of messes around with the rumble ult. Makes the rumble ult significantly weaker than normally it would be. And after that, we're just cutting backwards and hitting whoever we can, throwing out the snare and just pulling back and auto-attacking whoever is in front of us. Now we've kind of have the swing scenario, right, where you've absorbed the engage and now you're actually the one on the front foot. This is usually better, obviously, when you have Glacial, but it's not a big deal because you still steal movement speed and have a lot of movement speed on this champion. So you can kind of see right here, we're just burning whoever we can, and the Thresh flashes out. So now we're just hitting whoever is in front of us, and our snare comes out. And as you can see right here, right, once again, we can confirm that the team fight is occurring. There are a lot of people going in. Our teammate is hooked right here. Plus, our ulti is actually going to go across and deal a ton of damage to a lot of people. So after that, we're just timing our snare on the Zhonya's and just burning that player down. After that, though, Gwen was a champion that was made pretty recently, so your champion is way weaker, so you have to give ground on that and just burn down whoever you can. But one of the things that's really important to pay attention to is kind of this push and pull. A player pushes on you, and then you need to pull them back, and then you push back on them. That's kind of like how Senna always wants to do everything. So this is important for the next part, which is that all of the enemy players, they're low on resources, they're low on HP, so you actually have a lot more potential to turn this fight than most people would give it credit. So one of the terms that I always use, and I'm sure you guys have heard a million times, is leverage. So we want to make sure that with our flash, we leverage our flash. So we want to be flashing skill shots and covering distance at the same time. So as I see right here, the Thresh is actually relatively low. We're hitting him a bunch, and so we're going to flash the Mystic Shot at the same time to score our kill. So as you can see, I'm walking at this player, I have my E activated, and I want to be flashing to dodge this skill shot. Now, an important skill that is really important when you play champions like Senna is whenever you start dueling or even just auto-attacking in general, it's important to mix up your movements and decision-making. So you see right here, I auto-attack him, I auto-attack forward, and I'm just DPSing him. Another thing to note too is whenever you're auto-attacking, your auto-attack timer is pretty long a lot of times, so just using your spells in between all of them is really important. So you see right there, I've just now stolen a soul. So then we throw out our W, we walk forward. Then we walk to the left, then we walk to the right. It allows us to score all of those extra kills. And after that, it's an easy challenge for the Elise because I have my Nasus coming in at the same time, and we're able to actually kill 4 players despite that fight actually being a 1-for-3 at the start of the fight. So just learning how to pull and push is really, really important on this champion, because if you can do that well in all stages of the game, you'll get way more value out of this champion, which is why it's really, really important, and also why it's a really hard champion in general to play. But when you do it, you can do things like this on this champion pretty consistently, and why it's a great carry champion. But that kind of concludes the rest of the class. Does anyone have any other questions or anything like that they would like to ask, or interested in about Senna, or just maybe in general? Which skin is the best? The new skin is the best. The project one is really, really good. It still has the good animation canceling that the true damage one has, but it just looks a lot nicer, so I like it a lot more. Some people's complaint is the souls are a little bit harder to see. Totally a reasonable thing. So if for whatever reason the souls are really hard for you to see and that's a big deal, then just go back to true damage, because that's going to be the best. Animation canceling on Senna, every spell cancels an animation, or every auto attack and spell cancels an animation. So as you can see right here, right, if you watch me, I'm gonna steal the soul, and then my windup is going off and I'm Wing at the same time. So you see how like the W and the windup goes together, so you can do those. So it's auto Q or auto W or W auto Q. You can do it basically in between each of them. Basically, the most important thing really when it comes to animation canceling on Senna is just use an auto and then use a spell. Use an auto, then use a spell. If you do that, then it'll be pretty easy for you to start getting used to animation canceling. Thanks guys for coming out. I will see you guys next week for the next class. Bye guys. See you guys. Thanks for stopping by.